CNET, staff, council. All right, I'll call to order this College Township Council regular meeting for Thursday, April 18th at 7 o'clock. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be advised, if you didn't see on the screen, we were in executive session to discuss personnel matters prior to this meeting. All right, so public open discussion. Is anyone here for public open discussion for items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing or hearing none, moving on. Are there any new agenda items that council would like to add? Okay. All right, moving right into reports. Manager's update.
I'm used to having a special presentation or two.
A little bit of time.
Sorry, I'm ready now. Yes, we're going to be discussing the remand letter tonight relative to the Dale Summit Small Area Plan, and in particular with respect to form-based codes. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on. Relative to the solar power purchasing agreement, we're still waiting the full contract documentation. Mike, I don't know if you've had an indication lately if there's any time frame that they're targeting at this point?
No, I haven't had any updates. I just know it's still in legal review and taking some time.
Okay, very good. We had reported at our last meeting about the award of the CFA Multimodal Transportation Funding Grant of $500,000 for the Path to Campus. And the last item that I wanted to report on this evening had to do with the Aspen and non-payment of obligations. I did have an opportunity to have a direct conversation with the managing director of Kane Anderson out of Boca Raton, Florida, relative to settling the claims that the township has with Aspen. And I do know that our solicitor, Louis Glantz, is in the process of making contact with that individual, and we hope to have a resolution to that sooner rather than later. I'll keep you posted as we move forward with that. That's everything that I have this evening. If there's any questions about this or other items, I'm happy to try to answer.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for the manager? Okay. COG Regional County Liaison Reports. All right, so COG, let's go ahead first. Who wants to head out? Susan, do you have anything to report?
Nothing to report. Public safety did not meet.
Okay. Rich?
Finance, of course, met April 11th. Topics primarily were a review of the capital improvement plan to include the tweaks since the facilities committee. I think everyone will be pleased with the new variation coming forward. We will be seeing that at the general forum to come back to our municipality for comments. We also discussed a draft of the new purchasing policy, or updated. It's so much more robust that I'd call it new more than updated. We'll continuing on with the review of that document. There's a couple articles that need to be filled in that yet. Next, we were reviewing the regional parks loan draw extension. We touched on that at our last meeting. Interesting discussion at the meeting. As chair, I went last in my comments, and all the other municipalities are in support of the extension and expressed no reservations. However, if you talk about what project it's going to be used, that hasn't been talked about yet. So there seems to be good support for the extension, which is honestly my goal is to buy us more time so that we can have informed discussions on what possible projects we might work towards on that. So the Finance Committee recommended the extension but specifically, we added language that said that no project was being selected. We discussed the COLA CPI calculation results out of the HR committee. We got a little better understanding of what HR was trying to, they weren't prepared yet to make a decision. They didn't have enough information. They requested some additional information. From the Finance Committee side, I've requested when we analyze the guideline, which we'll be starting to do probably next month, that we analyze it showing the COG calculation of CPI and the BLS calculation of CPI so that we can see what the difference is. And if there is no difference, it's the perfect time to get on the same sheet as all of the member municipalities of COG. And with that, that took up till 11, and pending any questions.
Questions? No. Okay, for me, I had Parks Capital, which had no quorum, so we had discussion items, but no actions were taken. Executive Committee did meet. We got an update on the power purchase agreement, but mostly consisted of executive session on personnel issues. And then the search committee met yesterday, and I just wanted to share some information what's going on with the search committee for the COG executive director. So we have narrowed it down to 14 candidates that will go through the interview process. The first part of the interview process, it'll be 3 rounds in total. The first round will be a screening virtually done by GovHR, who we're contracting through. The second round will be with the search committee and GovHR in conjunction. And then that'll also be virtual. And then there will be a third round, which will consist of an assessment and maybe a presentation, not exactly sure what that looks like yet, and then interviews by various SMEs and functional groups that may also include the executive committee. That's to be ironed out more, round 3, with the executive committee and how that looks. But that is essentially where we're at now and what we were able to vet out in our last meeting. Any questions for that? That's all I have. Eric?
None of my 3 committees met, but I did have a question about Susan's report. Did you go yet?
Oh, the CTIDA?
Yeah, or a comment, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the IDA had a website until
Yes.
I read your report.
Yes.
And so I went there, and I saw that it is housed within the shell of the township's website. And that made it a little confusing, because if you look at the website, you know, the bottom 2/3 of the page is the IDA, but if you scroll to the top and try to use any of the menus, you're basically, the drop-down menus and links take you to our website. So just my thought that for some folks that might be confusing. It's certainly the easiest way to set it up for right now. But if they just might want to consider that. Either still housing it structurally within the website, but presenting it as such so that it's its own standalone website, so you don't have a mix of links that can since it's all the same color and everything, it's very easy to go up to the top and say, okay, I want to see who the members are, and you hit the members and it's us. It's
Yeah, that's how Carrie's been working on the social media, the LinkedIn page, the Facebook page. So she's done a really good job on the LinkedIn page.
I think it's
So,
great.
yeah,
This is more of a fine-tuning thing.
Yeah.
Because I didn't even know they had a site, so
Yep.
that was it.
She's done a great job bringing all that up.
That's all I have.
Okay. Tracy?
I gave my report last meeting.
Okay. Thank you. All right, if there's nothing further, then we'll move on to our favorite report of the evening, the PC. Do you have anything?
Actually, we did not meet on Tuesday.
Okay.
Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then moving on to DEIB.
We covered pretty much everything for the month at the last meeting, so I have nothing further to add tonight.
Okay. All right, I'll move on to the consent agenda. So I'm just gonna drink some water. It's a long one. Okay. Tonight's consent agenda consists of CA1, which is in minutes approval of our March 26, 2024 joint council with Planning Commission meeting, the April 4th, 2024 regular meeting. CA2 is correspondence receipt and approval of the following. A is a letter from a soldier's hand dated March 18th regarding a request to sponsor second annual 5K walk to remember our fallen. B is an email from Scott Stilson dated April 4, 2024 regarding North Bank flooding at Spring Creek Park. C is a letter from Constitution Day President dated March 29, 2024 regarding summary of outcomes from roundtable deliberations at 2023 Constitution Day event. D is an email from Simba Zafino dated April 9th regarding Center Hills Country Club Banquet and Aquatics Center. E is an email from Keith Bociccio dated April 10th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. F is an email from Cheryl Davis dated April 11th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. G is an email from David Zarling dated April 11th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. H is an email from Thomas and Kristen Katansik dated April 11th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. I is an email from Mary Reeder dated April 11th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. J is an email from William Martin from April 11th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. K is an email from Glenn Coates from April 11th regarding moratorium on construction. L is an email from Gene and Todd Brooks dated April 12th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. M is an email from Daniel Mitchell dated April 12th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. N is an email from Daniel Materna dated April 14th regarding casino. O is an email from Donna Oberheim dated April 14th regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. And P is an email from John Johnson dated April 14th, 2024 regarding moratorium on construction of pickleball courts. Okay, do any members of council wish to pull any, and CA3 is action item approval of the following: resolution R-24-17 recognizing May as Bike Month. B is resolution R-24-20 recognizing May 13th through the 17th, 2024 as Mount Nittany Health Week. And C is resolution R-24-19 recognizing Mr. Robert T. Long for his service as College Township Finance Director. Okay, do any members wish to pull any of those items?
Say to B.
Say A to B.
B.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I would like to have a moment to comment on CA3C.
Go ahead if you want.
We have a resolution in the packet tonight for council action that, pardon me?
Back page.
Okay, yeah, thanks. That acknowledges Bob Long, our finance director, who has decided to retire after approximately 24 and a half years of service to College Township. I can't say enough about Bob and his dedication to the township, his tenacity, his willingness to go the extra mile, and the work that he has performed for the township over 24 and a half years. It was my distinct pleasure to be able to hire Bob 24 and a half years ago, and to work with him and alongside him during the intervening years. He will be missed. He has been a great asset to College Township. He's a wonderful human being with a wonderful family. And I just want to wish Bob well in his future endeavors and in his retirement. And there will be an open house next week on Wednesday the 23rd from 2 to 4 o'clock. So I would encourage 24th, the 24th, my apologies. It is Wednesday, correct? It is Wednesday the 24th from 2 to 4 o'clock here Actually, it'll be downstairs in the library meeting room. But please, those of you that have known Bob and have worked with Bob over the years, I would encourage you to come out and wish Bob well. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me the time to speak to that particular item on tonight's agenda.
Thanks, Adam. All right, does anyone wish to pull anything else? Okay. I'm just going to ask, because I want, there's a lot on here. Is there any members of the public or in the audience that wish to speak to anything before we go ahead with the motion on the consent agenda? Any items in there? Okay. All right, we'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda minus CA2B.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, none opposed. All right, CA2B.
Yeah, that was me. I certainly sympathetic to, Scott and Carla, but, I've lived in that area for 25, 30 years before moving to Lamont in Houserville, and it is a floodplain, and it frequently floods. And I read Scott's suggestion, and I thought, maybe instead, this is an opportunity, instead of trying to eliminate the expanded parking lot. And I got this idea reading the report in the consent agenda of the Park and Rec Committee, where Dave Schulte suggested that there was some stormwater mitigation constructed for the annex, and that possibly it's not working over there, and we need to follow that up. But anyways, it gave me the idea that this might present itself with this Spring Creek expansion and potential parking lot, might present us with an opportunity to integrate some kind of stormwater mitigation or better mitigation as part of the project, instead of just eliminating, in my opinion, which is going to be a somewhat insignificant amount of impervious in relationship to the flooding that occurred. Because I look at those pictures and I say, Spring Creek parking lot or not, he's going to have, that water's going to be there. So my suggestion was just tossing it out there, not to decide or discuss tonight, but just food for thought, that, turn this thing around and use the Spring Creek Park plan, specifically maybe the parking lot, as an opportunity to address this. Because honestly, eliminating that impervious is really not going to change the scale of that flooding very much. Just a thought. Rich?
No,
You've been going down there for a long time.
absolutely, no, but I think I look at some of the more recent Penn State projects where they've made conscious efforts to mitigate, to build mitigation into their projects, where it all used to go.
On site.
Yes.
On
where it
site.
used
That's
to
what I'm
go.
talking about,
Yeah,
on site.
Right. So I think development sometimes is opportunities
Yeah.
for these type things. You're fighting other criterias in there too, but.
It's a floodplain. You're
Well,
going to have water there.
Well, and there's more water coming, there's more water coming in for various reasons and stuff, but by nature, a development plan can't make it worse. So again, from that standpoint, I don't support that, but I do see it as a potential opportunity.
That's all I wanted to offer.
Anyone else? So you want to make a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of accepting CA2B?
Aye.
Aye. All right, none opposed.
Hi, there is somebody here from Mount Whitney.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
do we want,
I totally forgot your name already. Kurt, I'm sorry.
please do step up, yeah. Yeah,
Thank you, Chair
Sorry
Beth.
about that.
yeah, we can read it into record.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple words if that's okay. Really want to, first of all, thank you, members of the council, Chair Beth, for your consideration of this proclamation regarding Mount Nittany Health Week. Mount Nittany Health Week is actually part of National Hospital Week that's celebrated nationwide this upcoming in May. You know, we have more than 2,400 employees and over 220 providers that work at not just the hospital, but across the entire system. And what motivates them is our mission. It's pretty simple. Healthier people, stronger community. We really love waking up every morning and taking care of the residents of College Township and beyond. And that commitment is evidenced, you know, physically now as represented by the many investments we're making back into this community in the various care environments. We'll be opening our new outpatient center just right up the road here that will consolidate 11 medical specialties, but more importantly, it will allow us to recruit more providers and healthcare professionals to this region to increase access to healthcare here for the community. In just a short couple weeks, we'll be opening our first ever Mount Nittany Health Express Care, which will also provide a point of access for unscheduled on-demand care to the residents of College Township and beyond. And obviously, you're very familiar, and we're very appreciative of all your support with the big dig that's going on right next to the hospital. I'm pleased to report we finished all 712 micropiles. I had to be instructed what micropiles are, but we finished those. The foundation is set, and in just a few days, you'll begin to see the steel erection going up, framing for the hospital. So we're very excited about that. And so Mount Nittany Health Week is really a way to show recognition and appreciation to all the healthcare providers that work at Mount Nittany Medical Center and the health system for all that they do. And we really thank you and appreciate for your support and consideration of this proclamation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I, while he's up there, did you have
Comments, questions? I was going to read this in the record.
Okay. Yeah, before we do that.
Yeah.
Quick, I got my mail today about the Express Clinic. It didn't say where the location was going to be.
It's at Hills Plaza on South Atherton Street. And
I
if
knew
there
that.
wasn't an address on there,
But was it in there?
That. Yeah.
Was that location noted in the mailer? I'm not sure.
Should have been, but if it wasn't, we'll
All
make
right,
sure it is. Trust me, you're going to get lots of other omni-channel marketing and communications for that. So, yeah, but thank you.
The more important question is, I can now tell my granddaughter the crane will be in operation soon. We can watch it.
The crane, actually, a little story about the crane. There are only 7 of those types of cranes in the entire world, and this is the only one in North America right now.
It'll be.
That crane was imported from France. Yes.
We'll see it in operation soon, is what you're saying?
Very soon. That's
All right.
exactly right. Non-stop for about the next year plus.
This is a big deal at our house. I'm sorry.
It's a big crane.
It is. Want to see it doing stuff.
You'll have that opportunity. Our CFO actually climbed up in the crane to deliver donuts and coffee to the operator not too long ago. I'll let him do that.
Yeah, it's all right.
Well, Susan, if you do us the pleasure.
Resolution R24-20, a resolution celebrating Mount Nittany Health Week 2024. Thanking the board, the leadership, and the team of Mount Nittany Health for their enduring legacy of service to the community. Whereas Mount Nittany Health is the community's locally governed health system with a mission of healthier people, stronger community. And whereas Mount Nittany Health, with its more than 2,400 employees and 220 providers, has provided more than 120 years of service and outstanding health care to our region. And whereas Mount Nittany Health is a trusted partner in our region's growth and development and has honored this partnership through continual investments in people, programs, technology, and facilities to ensure the community is well served for future generations. And whereas the Mount Nittany Health team brings compassion, expertise, and ongoing commitment to caring for our families, neighbors, and friends. And be it resolved by the Council of Township of College that the College Township Council hereby joins with the Mount Nittany Health team in celebrating Mount Nittany Health Week 2024 and commends the board, the leadership, and the entire Mount Nittany Health team for its record of service to the region. And be it further resolved that an authenticated copy of this resolution, signed by the College Township Council Chair, be provided to Mount Nittany Health. Approved by the Council of the Township of College this 18th day of April 2024.
Right.
And I'd also like to present this as an almost 30-year employee of Mount Nittany Health and provider.
Thank you, Dr.
So,
Trainer.
congratulations.
All right. Are we ready to move on? Okay. Old business number 1. Dale Summit Revitalization Form-Based Code Remand to PC. Lindsay.
All right, thank you. So in front of you tonight, you have a memo and a draft remand. This is as a result of our discussion at the last meeting where we provided you with a guide to inform this remand. So this is the council's opportunity to remand the form-based code prepared by DPZ to the Planning Commission. We've had some success with remands in the past, particularly the workforce housing remand, where this remand letter utilizes that same format. So there are a few things in the agenda that are in the memo that we want to first discuss. One, of course, is the intent statement. The intent statement within the form-based code was prepared by DPZ to be consistent with the vision plan for the Dale Summit area plan. So if council wants to take a minute and look over that vision statement and the intent statement, that would be great. We could do that quick and then move on to objectives if that's what you want. Although I want to tell you that number 1 in the memo is actually on the second page of the attachment. So sorry about that. So we have the intent statement. It involves the community, the block and the building, and the district. I don't know if council has had the opportunity to go through this and if you want to provide any initial feedback.
Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and lead off with questions or comments on the intent statement first, and then we can move on to the objectives. All right. Rich, you have anything?
The only question I have is there a reason the objectives come before the intent and the remand? Yeah.
No,
It's just how it played out.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, is it something that we could potentially?
I can add to it is, if you look at the first objective under Planning Commission, it's part of their review to look at the intent statement. The thought of having council look at the intent goes back to kind of precedent that we've set over the last couple of these.
Yes.
That, council owns the intent and Planning Commission goes through and does the detail work. Just bearing in mind, the remand letter is set up to kind of walk Planning Commission through their objectives, the first being review the intent statement that you have established. So the intent of this was to make sure that the intent statement as written and put in the remand letter is what you want.
Okay.
So staff is laying out the objectives of what PC is supposed to accomplish. Okay, one of those things that they're supposed to accomplish is to ensure that the intent, that they keep the intent that council wishes to see here. So think of the balance of the letter as.
No, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
I got it. It's just so.
It comes in a weird sequence.
Right, generally you say this is what, I think
if that's something that we feel we need to flip or whatnot, I mean, that's the reason this is back here.
Right.
Is to provide as much clarity and direction as council deems appropriate to Planning Commission to do what needs to be done.
Yeah, ultimately, if you view the remand letter as a standalone, the sequencing makes more sense. But for the purposes of council, before you can really do a deep dive into the objectives, we want to make sure that the intent statement's hitting the target.
And that's the way we move forward with the workforce housing. So we felt that it would make sense to move forward this way.
Mm-hmm. It's a mix. It's different styles for sure. I mean, generally, expressing the intent and then the objectives. And I understand why it was done, the way it was done and everything. But as you indicated, council, one of the biggest things that council does is convey its intent, and that, to me, that should be at the beginning before you do anything else. And then we're still asking them to ensure that the intent statement that we've presented is consistent with the visions and everything. So Like I said, it's just a stylist. I don't think it paralyzes the document by any stretch. It's similar to putting defined terms at the beginning of a contract or at the beginning or at the end of the contract, that kind of thing. I'm one of those in the beginning so then I know what those words mean. I don't have to flip to the back to find out. So, but outside of that, I think it's a very good document.
Okay. I would agree that I think with what Rich is, did you have anything else?
No, I did not, thanks.
I would agree with what Rich is saying, put the intent up front. I like the objectives. Yeah, I think it's a good document, honestly. Eric?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said about the intent being up front, because that's the first thing that struck me, because we work in similar environments and processes. I don't understand why it would flow better for the process to not have the intent in the front, but if staff feels that way, that's fine. The content's the same.
Right.
The one question I had about intent was, going through this process, did either DPZ or Planning Commission have any questions, comments, or suggestions on the intent? Was it?
No, not at the joint meetings, not during any Planning Commission discussions that we've had to date.
Okay, so it was real clear to everybody that has read it, or most folks really just haven't? Planning Commission's focused more on the objectives?
Well, the Planning Commission really hasn't seen these objectives yet. They have the intent, as does Council, because we've had the code and the plan for so many weeks. So I'm just assuming that the Planning Commission, is aware of the intent that is found within the code.
Okay, then two minor editorial type comments. First, I think it's in the staff lead-in where we talk about the Planning Commission and staff becoming subject matter experts on form-based code. And again, this isn't I'm not suggesting a change in here. It's more of my comments that we hire DPZ as the subject matter experts, and I see Planning Commission and staff's role as supporting DPZ in the sense that we're going to take their form-based code expertise, put it in the context of the reality of College Township. So you don't necessarily need to be a form-based code expert, nor do I think you should worry a lot about that or spend a lot of time trying to be that way. I would take them at their word, and I have no reason to doubt that they are based on their presentation, and just absorb that, reconcile it against us and the realities of College Township, and come up with what we're tasking them to come up with. Then the second comment is on page 2, C and G. C and G under the objectives. They're kind of the same. A school is an ordinary activity of daily living that should occur within walking distance. But if this group feels it's important enough to call out schools separately, and that's fine. But there's quite a bit of overlap there. And this is just my analness of trying to get it, as concise down to as few objectives as possible.
Yeah, there are a lot.
And then J, let's see. Yeah, it's planning for people. I wonder if that is there any importance to the order? Okay, because J is so broad, and it's almost borderline in intent, in the sense that we're prioritizing people as opposed to traditionally automobiles, and then a very large gap, and then pedestrians and bikes. So I don't know if we could, if there's a consensus that we just really, because there may be things other than automobiles, pedestrians, and bicycles, specifically, it's people. People-centric planning for people. That's the term used most frequently in modern planning terms. So those were my only two thoughts.
Okay.
It's good, by the way. I agree with Rick.
Thank you.
I'm good with everything.
Adam?
Yeah, just a quick suggestion as far as what Eric just spoke to. Item J on page 3. That development should adequately accommodate automobiles while prioritizing the pedestrian, the bicyclist, and the spatial form of public areas. If you take that and you would add it to page 1, number 5.
And put it in objectives.
And create that as a broader objective
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
because I think that they're that they're very similar. And it speaks to your point, Eric, that as an intent statement, it probably belongs more as an objective. If I understood your.
Yeah, you
Yes.
said it better than I did, which happens a lot. It does.
But that may be.
That's why he's
Yeah, that's
award-winning.
good. Good
Here
suggestion.
we go. Here we go.
Oh, now he's lost his train of thought.
No, that was it.
Oh, all right.
I'm
No,
looking for about one of those.
I think that's a
amendments.
good, that's good.
I think that's a very good
And he's more
suggestion.
concise.
Very good. Okay,
So-
Susan?
Yeah, so I did something a little different with this. I went through, I really, since I'm newer to this, I took that vision statement as something that evolved coming back to the community, or the citizens committee that started the work. So it feels like a directive from the people who started the work. And so I broke it out and I looked at the different elements of the intent statement and then looked at the different parts of our intent statement. So the vision statement broke out the vision statement and the intent statement. And, you know, I think your points about, you know, the sort of broader intent statements that need to be maybe even put into the objectives make good sense. But I think it really comes together nicely, and I think because form-based code is such a different way of looking at development for the area, that it really is important to be as inclusive, even though some of it feels almost too detailed, and maybe that'll work itself out with PC. But I think it's really important to link as much of the details right back to that original vision statement, because it's an ambitious vision statement, but it's a directive. So I thought this aligned really nicely. I did it a little bit more graphically in my mind so I could see it that way. But I thought the work was good.
All right, so I'll go back through and ask if there's any more specifics on the objectives. Rich?
I like Eric and Adam's collaboration on moving from the one item to more of an objective.
Anything else on objectives, Eric? Tracy? Susan? And then you had an ask on the timeline, right?
Yeah.
So let's discuss the timeline.
Sure. When DPZ was in town last time, we came up with this schedule. But since then, we added checkpoints where we thought that they would make sense for Planning Commission to come back if that's Matt through the liaison or if it's staff reporting back. We feel that, you know, keeping you in the know of where we are, like, you know, I remember Eric said, you know, you want to maybe see something before something else later in the
Yeah.
ordinance, so.
But, right, the grouping was my point.
Right.
Is it, if we're breaking it up, make sure we have the like things grouped together.
Yeah, and I feel that we've done that, and then the checkpoints, of course, and then, you know, any opportunities the planning commission may want to request another joint meeting.
Right. That was going to be my only comment, is that maybe let planning commission decide if that's an opportunity for, or a need, or beneficial need for a joint meeting.
Yeah, and if you're asking for comments, there are changes to this from what we saw the last time. You know, because the last time, building placement and building elevations were in two separate groups, and now they're in the same group. So that's what I was looking for, and I appreciate that.
And some may take more than, you know, going through this, some may take more than one meeting, but, you know, as the memo states, we won't let perfection be the enemy of the good. That's what we're hoping for. So
I just had one comment on it. I was kind of thinking with timelines and timeline or the schedule that they would, we would ask them to come back with their proposed schedule, right? Based off of this, right? Like this is, we're giving you some fodder here, but what are you proposing? What dates are you wanting to check in? What dates are you going to be done? And maybe they're like, hey, we got to group these a little bit differently or something like that.
So you want to see it run past them first? I feel like our first step is going to be, again, to review the remand with the planning commission. If they have any questions or comments, then, the liaison and staff can relay those back to council before we actually dive in.
Yeah, but what I want to encourage them is build out your plan for how you're going to get this done and give it back to us as soon as possible. That's kind of what, frame it out. That's what I'm trying to say.
And, to that point, I think there's an opportunity as they go through the remand letter to think through it a little bit. And obviously, I think we all recognize that there's going to be some fluidity to that schedule. If they get in there and get into the weeds, it may adjust. But I think, we could very easily add that as a point under that first point. Review the remand letter, any questions, clarifications, and a proposed or an estimated schedule of completion.
Perfect.
I think it's imperative that ultimately planning commission end up with something to start with. And so I think to provide a remand letter to PC without some proposed timeframe, here's the check-ins, I think that would be a lot to ask.
No, I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that we ask them to finish it out and provide it back.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. As part of the remand, finish out what we framed out for you with specifics and provide it back.
And I think that's good. That's setting expectations on both sides. So we're not thinking, oh, I can't believe they're not this far along.
Sure.
Right.
And I think it's a fairness to both sides.
And most of these look like they'll need at least 2 meetings, a meeting to dig in and then a meeting to regroup, which puts it at about a month. And some of them looked much more technical and might need more.
Right. I went through the ordinance, some of them are, 2 pages to review, could take a meeting, and then some of them are maybe 10 or 12 pages that could take 2 or 3 meetings, so.
And as they, go ahead.
No, I mean, are there any other comments that you have?
No, I'm just thinking as they move through it, I think it'll move a little bit more quickly because I think it'll start to pull together, it'll funnel together. That you're bumping up against the same information that's new, very new at the beginning, but as you're looking at things like block structure and, setbacks and things like that, that will start to become more intuitive as they're looking through the next thing, as long as that schedule is lined up in a way that's logical and builds on what they've reviewed.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, Mike?
The only thing I was going to do is just in summary, I heard a few comments here, things that I just want to get one more point of clarification. Obviously, with the intent statement, I agree, Rich, it's the style.
The reality of college, or whatever. I don't want to recreate the wheel here, reinvent the wheel. We've got the wheel, we purchased the wheel.
But I guess my summary point is that from what I heard, there's nothing that I would consider a substantive change, maybe just a reorganization slightly of the letters. So at the end of the day, I guess the final question, if the council's comfortable with that, we'll do that at a staff level and prepare it to go to Planning Commission.
Is everybody fine with that?
Yeah?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay. Did we have anybody here from the public to speak to this item? Okay. All right, old business number 2, workforce housing ordinance revisions. Lindsay, again.
All right, thank you. I do have a PowerPoint presentation to go along with this. So along with myself and Mark and other staff members, we also have Matt Fenton here, who was at the meetings where we discussed everything with workforce housing, and so he can help if need be. So just to get started, next slide, please. This is the attainable housing ordinance, and we'll get to the attainable word here in a minute. So kind of related to the discussion we just had, early on, council reviewed and endorsed the intent statement of the workforce housing ordinance because there was none at the current time. Then council felt comfortable remanding that intent statement and the ordinance to the planning commission. Prior to the planning commission getting into the meat of the ordinance, there was a chalk talk by Mr. Brumbaugh and some other subject matter experts, including folks from the Center County Housing and Land Trust, the Realtors Association. So I think council could be afforded that same opportunity if you wish to have more than one meeting. So we put some options out here if you would set a public hearing tonight, how we would move forward to a public hearing, and if you would set a public hearing at our May 2nd meeting, we can move forward there. If you require more time, we can adjust that as needed. So getting back to the attainable housing, before this was our workforce housing ordinance, we're changing the name, we're recommending changing the name to attainable housing because of Bill 1386. This bill allows municipalities who have certain criteria to become an attainable housing community through designation by the Department of Community and Economic Development. One of the criteria for becoming an attainable housing community is having an attainable housing ordinance. So as we go through this, I'll be using those terms interchangeably, so there's no confusion. Also, by doing this, it will open us up to more grant opportunities as well through DCED. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so sort of diving in here, I'm going to go through each slide and then pause. And if council has any input, we can go from there. So the first one is section 1 in the ordinance definitions. There were no housing definitions incorporated into the workforce housing ordinance. So we came up with some terms that we found within the ordinance, and we're including them in definitions, which is section 200-7 in the zoning ordinance. So zoning definitions will be updated as a result of this ordinance. And then section 2 is chapter 200, article 8, 200-38-4, which is now known as attainable housing. We updated the intent, of course, per council. Density has always been the trigger to this ordinance, and there's no changes or suggested recommendations to change that. There is one exemption to this inclusionary ordinance, and that is if the development proposes 10 or less dwelling units, then you're not subject to the requirements here. Something that we did add, because if council recalls, when we first started this, we talked about equity and looking at this ordinance through an equitable lens. One of the things that were removed were the ability for a developer to request or a waiver of adding in parkland and open space, and also a waiver to allow for sidewalks just on one side of the street. So because we took those out, the Planning Commission felt adding all workforce units within residential developments will have safe access via sidewalks, shared use paths, or bike paths to parkland or open space located within or near the subject residential development. So that was the rationale behind that. Not only was to consider having more walkable neighborhoods, but also because we took that regulation out that allows the waiver of those two things. So with those, do you have any feedback for us and what we added?
Okay, is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this?
Yes.
Please state your name and your affiliation.
My name is Ara Kravanjan, and I represent HFL Corporation. We're a local real estate development company in business here for over 50 years. We're also very familiar with building affordable housing. Over the last 10 years, we've built just under 200 units in our center region, of which 120 of them or more have been right here in College Township. Our last project that we just finished is Evergreen Heights, right off of Trot Road in Shiloh. So we're very familiar with and support affordable housing, attainable housing. And we're here because, we're familiar with the ordinance as it was written before. We think it's a good ordinance, and however, some of the modifications that we've read in here give us some pause and some concern that we'd like to address with you, because in order to achieve the ability to build attainable housing, we have to have a cooperation. Not only, it can't be only on the developer, and some of it also is with some concessions that have to be provided. And then there's obviously the community involvement as well. I know we stopped at this point where Lindsay's pointing out, but I can tell you that in reading it through the ordinance, there's 3 distinct areas that we see if you can couple these together. There's the alternative methods of providing or satisfying the ordinance, which are obviously the fee in lieu that's been addressed here and modified or eliminated at this point. There's the land donation ability, and there's the credits for existing workforce housing units. I mean, these are important mechanisms that we have in order to, make the availability in one place. If it doesn't work there, we can satisfy it in another area. And land swaps. These options have to be afforded to, force it in one direction. It makes it very difficult to comply. The second area, again, this is throughout the ordinance in here, is what we call as a development assistance that enables us to actually build affordable housing. And those items are, reduced fees, municipal fees, water, sewer, anything that helps for those particular units that in order to be able to put that money into building those affordable houses. There's the open space, the reduced open space area. That's also important. I mean, there is open space. It's just a matter if we're building 10% additional units, it's just the open space will be shared by just a few more people. But adding more land adds to the cost, makes it a little more difficult to comply with the units that would be added. Even with the incentive bonuses, if you add to the open space, it makes it difficult to have the development be successful. The reduced sidewalks, that's also an important feature. I live in a neighborhood in the Center Hills and there's no sidewalks, and we're very happy with that, but that's not to say that there's other developments throughout the township and different areas outside of the township that have only sidewalks on one side of the street. We're not suggesting building the affordable or attainable units on the side that doesn't have sidewalks. We're just saying that cost savings goes toward investing in being able to afford to build one unit, if not, let alone 10% of the units in the development. And then, as I mentioned, the fees, the water and sewer. As we all know, these costs have gotten quite high, and every bit helps. If under this ordinance, if you're building the other assistance would be if we're building an apartment building where we have rental units, other considerations as like alerta, a tax incentive, a tax abatement that we would have to also get some cooperation from the school district, the township, and the county. And those tax savings also, again, that gets reinvested in making all of us coming together to make that happen. And the third area that gives, as a developer, gives us some pauses, is the administration of, the affordable units. We're in the business of developing real estate. That's what we know what to do, how we do it, and we deal majority of which is to market rate. For us to be involved with, making sure that everybody on an ongoing basis qualifies is something that's additional cost for us and everything, but if this is something that the township wants or any municipality wants, it should have some department that recertifies those rents. We cannot handle all that on an ongoing basis, just for consideration purposes. So, like I said, there's a number of areas, some suggestions that we have, and I appreciate to Lindsay's defense, she did provide this ordinance to me at the end of February. I didn't have a chance to focus in on it myself as much as I did in this last week to come in here, but we're all here for the benefit of time. Nothing is etched in stone, but we're sharing with you as a developer who's built affordable housing, and we still do in the township. We just want you to consider these items as you go through these modifications. We'll be happy to continue to work with staff and come back with, whatever additional comments that we have instead of wasting everybody's time tonight. I don't want to flip every page and point everything out. So.
Okay. Comments, questions? Council?
Sure, I'd like to take advantage of the fact that Ara is here, even though we stopped at this point. Yeah, you answered the first question. These comments were provided to the PC as they were working through this, correct? Okay. Second question.
I'm sorry, they just recently got, I just provided the comments to Lindsay just at the beginning of this week, so.
Right, so they weren't in the draft, or they're not incorporated, okay.
My comments are not reflected in this draft.
Okay.
I'm just giving you my comments from reading the current draft.
Yeah, obviously it would have worked better to have had them at the start.
Yes.
But we are where we are,
Yes.
and you know that we have worked together over the years on this, I believe quite successfully.
Yes.
So that leads to my second question. Since you have a handful of successful developments already in College Township, one of the things that at least I did when we started down this road, is when we recraft this thing, what did we learn, from those projects that we wished we had done differently or could have done better? And if I could put you on the spot to be as honest as you can in those experiences with Evergreen, Lime Rock, and others, are there areas that stand out that things could have worked better had the ordinance or had the incentives or had something been a little bit different? Just off the top of your head, big picture kind of stuff.
Sure. Those projects that were mentioned in the township here, they were all affordable housing units, all of them. Like, there's no market rate units in Lime Rock or Evergreen. So I can tell you one of the items that we've seen which we could have some relief on is the number of parking spaces. There's if that's a requirement, if it can be modified, and that goes to additional savings.
We talk about minimum.
Excuse me?
The minimum number required?
Yes, the minimum number of parking spaces required. There is a reduction proposed, but
Right.
there's still a significant overparked situation out in the facilities.
Okay, let's go back to that for a second. So you're saying the minimum is still too low, or still too high?
It's too high, it's too many parking spaces.
But then you say overparked.
There's too many parking spaces per the
Provided.
requirement.
Okay, I got you.
What was the other issue?
Well, no, that's fine. I didn't expect I just thought since you were here, we would throw that out there. And I think a lot of that has to do, at least in Lime, say, use Lime Rock as an example, is proximity to transit, and that's where we get into the sidewalks and that, and whether it's sidewalks on both sides, it's almost better to have at least some sidewalks and then maybe some off-site sidewalks, or a mechanism to provide off-site sidewalks to connect the parcel we're talking about with the main infrastructure, the transit infrastructure. That's what we ran into at Lime Rock.
We did that, and if you look at Pleasant Point here, it's got a sidewalk that connects down to a bus stop that we created. Right. So there's an alternate side of the road where we did build this hard structure for parking. So we would like to see that as an ongoing option, because again, those savings are considerable to make it happen.
Okay.
That's all I have for now.
So, thank you for coming this evening.
Sure.
And I'm relatively new to council, so I've been learning more about this. But some of the things that stood out to me are more probably philosophical than the specifics of parking. But I think the really important piece of this is that we've committed to socioeconomic diversity in the community. And I think it's well known that people who work in our community, many people who work in our community can't afford to live in our community. And that's obviously a concern for me working at the health system. So I was looking at affordable versus attainable, and I understand that you've done affordable housing development in the community, and that's been a real help to many people. But I think this is a little bit different than that. This is attainable housing, and this is based on the area median income. I see Missy Schoonover is here, and so that's an important distinction to me because it links it to a percentage of the median income, which is different than affordable housing. So I don't think in that sense they're interchangeable. So this is something new. And so some of the incentives that might have been built into the previous workforce ordinance, the previous workforce housing ordinance, had to do with maybe changing some of the amenities in the affordable housing areas. So that made a difference in terms of equity of amenities and housing for the various developments that you were doing. So I think these are important philosophical differences.
The philosophical difference there would just be the median income, honestly, as you point out.
Right.
The reality is the cost of the dwelling unit for building, if you look at our projects there, you can't tell them apart, whether it was 60% of adjusted median income or anywhere to 100% to 120% of area income. Any workforce attainable or affordable housing, whatever monocle you want to put in front of that, at the end of the day, it's the cost of building that dwelling unit. It still is a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom unit with 1 bath or 2 baths. All of those same costs and concerns go into each one of those categories. And wherever you're going to provide that expense or that cost, there has to be some savings that have to be contributed overall through the project in order to be able to succeed at building that unit, whether you're going to rent it at 60% of AMI or 100% of AMI or 120% of AMI.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the other incentives is that you would be able to build up further if you include workforce housing. So there would be the opportunity to include units on top of, so am I right about this, that the height allowance would go up? So you would be able to include more units. So would that also be considered something of an incentive?
It's an incentive, but it's still additional, it's an offset. It doesn't offset the cost of building.
So an offset versus an incentive.
It doesn't. I mean,
understood.
On the philosophical side, I'm giving you the practical reality of it. It really comes down to a cost. It's not, it's easier or different or something less than a house of 100% of AMI that, than you're building for a 60% of AMI. It's just not actually, in most cases, to tell you, it costs more to build an attainable or affordable housing because of guidelines and requirements than sometimes it does for a market rate. And I'm not comparing it to a solid granite countertop versus Formica countertop. That is a difference. But the structure and the finishes and the energy efficient ratings for all the appliances, they're all the same as a market rate cost center.
Thank you.
Sure.
Lizzie, did you have more to add?
And the rest of my.
Could I, just to make sure I understood what you said, if we were looking at somewhere in the ordinance where the township could give some ground and it would have the least detrimental effect on the plan or whatever, it's parking. That was one of the first things that comes to mind. In other words, that's a solid savings in building that you don't think the township would miss or would have the least amount of effect.
I think that's an easy it should be a calculation that should be considered.
Okay.
And which helps, again, contribute to the cost bucket, if you can, to actually provide the affordable units, but all the other measures also through the sidewalks, through the open space reduction, all of that is additive because.
Right, but we're balancing, as Susan said, philosophical issues there with equity and access. Transportation seems to be, the parking, the storing of your vehicle, though, seems to be a little bit different out there, and to me, at least philosophically, a lot easier to give on if, based on your experience, it has almost no benefit to have those additional, that you can cut
No,
back without impacting.
You're making a obvious fact of what I'm saying, but why would a two-sided sidewalk street help? If you have one side that enables somebody to connect to, what is the inequity there?
I was speaking sidewalks in general, not necessarily one versus two and access. I was looking for some takeaway, taking advantage of the fact that you were here, that we could run with and hang, and say, hey, based on the experience we have, this is something we could contribute to making it more, from a business standpoint, more workable without losing effectiveness of it. And that sounds like one.
That does sound like one.
Okay.
It's one additional one.
Well, and I think there's also looking over, I'm sorry, I couldn't.
I'm done.
Thank you. On page 7, there's another, the reduced lot requirement sizes are noted, that the reduced lot requirements for the attainable housing, those reduced lot requirements could also be applied to market rate houses in
Yes.
that same area. So is that considered a bonus or an incentive?
That obviously enables us to make room to build the units, yes.
Right, okay.
That does help.
Okay.
All right.
One of the things that I think is important to keep in mind as we continue with the discussion is that the original College Township Workforce Housing Ordinance was first developed in 2007, 2009 era. Okay. At that point in time, the ordinance was specifically constructed to incentivize the development of workforce housing units. It was primarily targeted toward home ownership opportunities, although there was a clause that incorporated workforce rental units. Okay. But remember and those of you that weren't present in 2007 and 2009, originally it was to incentivize the development of workforce units, really of any type, either owner-occupied or rentals, but primarily focused on owner-occupied. Over the years, once that ordinance was adopted, there was absolutely zero involvement, use of that ordinance. And council at the time, after about 5 to 7 years, made the decision that we're no longer making this or going to allow this simply to be an incentive. This is going to be a requirement, and the trigger will be density. And the more dense a development that is proposed, that it will be at that point, once those triggers are tripped, that there will be the requirement that it will become an inclusionary ordinance. What was not done at that point when council determined to make the workforce housing ordinance inclusionary was that there was no modification to any of the other elements that had pre-existed in the original adoption of the ordinance. So the incentives that had been in place, things like reduced parkland or elimination of parkland, sidewalks on one side, none of those items were actually removed from the ordinance. And I'm not arguing whether or not they should remain or they should go, but what I'm suggesting is that they were developed in a very different context than what we're dealing with now. They still may have the same impact in terms of overall cost to a development. But I do think it's important that the context be understood about what we're coming out of and what we're moving into, because I do think that it's relevant. So I just wanted to be sure that as this conversation continues tonight and possibly in a few weeks, that we keep that in mind, that we're basically taking an ordinance that has not been rewritten substantially since 2007, 2009 era, and trying to bring that up to date and bring that into the contemporary, So with that in mind, I think that may help to explain why some of the things that you're seeing and are being discussed here tonight were there in the first place. And again, without me arguing whether they should stay or they should go, perhaps gives you some insight as you move forward.
Okay. Do you want to go over the rest of the changes? Do we need to highlight that, or is everybody voiced?
If I may add to one thing that Adam just offered. I mean, whatever the genesis is of what was there, I mean, those items the elements that I mentioned have made it possible. I mean, to take them out wholesale, it could make it very difficult. I'm just telling you what we would, to be honest with you, Eric, to answer a question that you asked, what could we do? It's not only what the township can do to help, but we would benefit if we were able to bring some more assistance from lowering impact fees, having the county involved. There are programs with the DCED that can help to broaden our basket of abilities to bring the workforce housing units to every developer that's required to do it. It's just not on the developer's responsibility. Again, I'm not trying to get out of the obligation. I'm saying it makes it easier, it makes, not easier, it brings everybody together to make it happen. So however the ordinance is written right now, sometimes some sauces come out perfect because they just happen to be that way. I mean, I'm just trying to say taking certain things away may be a detriment to what we're trying to achieve here.
So, yes, thank you. I'm understanding that better. So I think something important here is, we are coming back, some of those incentives, to me, they compromise the equity and what we would need to do to be able to build, that diversity that we talked about, that socioeconomic diversity. I'm thinking in particular about development in the Dale Summit area. So, if we do have a casino and we have 400 workers that are added to the region, we're going to need to find housing for them near where they work. We really do have to do what we can to get people to live proximate to where they work. And I guess the other question I have, your points are well taken, and I do hear what you're saying. But the other piece of this I would ask is, PC has been at this work for several weeks. Was this not a conversation during discussions at PC? Is that the place where this could have been something that could have been incorporated by the time it got here?
Yeah, typically. We tried to, make it public knowledge that we were updating the workforce housing ordinance. And as you mentioned, we did reach out and say, the workforce housing ordinance is being looked at by the Planning Commission, provide any feedback you may have. We did, but the Planning Commission also, we didn't get a lot of public input at the Planning Commission level, which could have helped.
Councilmember Turner, I'm not trying to fault anybody from staff or the Planning Commission.
Sure.
I told you the timing as far as when something was sent, and there's no excuse for us not have brought it up between February and now. But, it is something that came to my knowledge. I mean, and also others that I've spoken to, other developers here, that there's no speed to a solution that is flawed. So we're here to try to voice our concerns, not that we've fallen asleep at the wheel. We're alert, we're here, we're concerned. That's why we're bringing it up at this time. We're not trying to delay something. We're just trying to offer what we believe works best.
A quick comment here. As Lindsay is able to move through her presentation, there are several things that Mr. Gavagian mentioned that I think are going to need to be discussed at some length by College Township Council. These were things the Planning Commission had offered up as potential changes, but acknowledged that there needed to be additional input and feedback on the part of council. Specifically, fee in lieu, specifically land dedication, to name just two, and there may have been more. So
The
there
credits.
are clearly areas where PC was, I don't want to say that they were unsure, but they recognized that there needed to be additional conversation at and by council relative to ultimately resolving that particular issue. And those may or may not be things that staff might happen to agree with relative to anyone's position. So I do think it's important here that there are some things that we will encounter as we go through the recommendations that came forward from PC, that in all likelihood, Mr. Kavagian has spoken to and are things for consideration by council.
Okay, so let's go through.
Is staff going to point those out as we
That's what I
move
was
through?
gonna say.
They're
Let's go
noted
through it,
clearly in
let's point
the
them out and
presentation.
we'll
Very good.
discuss them
Make
right
a
there.
quick
and then.
suggestion though before we start.
Yeah.
Just quick, since ours here, by the way, thanks for coming. Hearing what Susan said, there's clearly going to be some philosophical issues that we're going to want to stand our ground a little bit on. So I think it's going to be important. Here's where your input's really important. If you sense that need to stand our ground philosophically in some areas, and I won't mention them, we're just talking in general here, and we need to know from you, what are the other areas where we can give in more that would provide enough financial, offset, so that we come out of this with the balance that we need for this to work. So instead of just making cuts across the board or, pulling things, let's figure out what it is that's really important to us, and then you find the offset and the degree of offset in the other areas, so that in the end, this thing nets out, in a manner that it works. We don't have to figure it out tonight. I'm just saying maybe as we work through this over the next couple of meetings, probably.
We're engaged, we're not gonna miss an email. We're here to make sure that we don't, we want the collaborative effort. One of the points here, if I in the definitions is, the township, works with the private sector and collaborating to come up with one of the best programs that's available, that works for both sides. We agree.
And I think that's important, because we do this with developers all the time, that, private for profit.
Yes.
But this is so important that I think we are much more open to the give and take process than we might ordinarily be in order to make this work. But there are a couple of areas that we've been hearing about that are really philosophically important. We need the offsets from you, so that even if we stand our ground here, it's still, you can make it work.
All right, so let's go through the presentation so we can kind of highlight those more philosophically important things that we're going to stand our ground on and need to collaborate more on.
Okay, next slide, please, Jen. Okay. I'm sorry?
Did I go too?
Nope. No, you're on the right one. Okay, so now we're getting into incentives, and the way incentives are set up are by single-family and duplex, multifamily, and townhomes, and planned residential developments. So with single-family houses and duplexes, the side yard setback for a lot containing a workforce unit got reduced to 7 feet, and that side yard setback may also be reduced to 7 feet for market rate housing units. That was one effort to make things look the same from the outside. We removed the option, again, to waive parkland and open space for equity. Same with sidewalks. We increased the area median income range from 80% to 100%. We changed that to 80 to 120% to capture more of that missing middle that we're really targeting for this ordinance. We're also permitting market rate units in the development to have the same lot requirements as the attainable units for equity and consistency reasons. Go ahead to the next slide. I don't think there were anything on this. There was nothing on this slide I don't think that was brought up by for further discussion, but here we have a point of discussion. Still under single family houses and duplexes, we removed the ability for households making less than 80% of AMI to have one market rate unit with similar requirements, but this is up for debate. Because the section above this in the ordinance states that for every 2 workforce housing units which are affordable to those making between 80 and 100%, 1 market rate unit housing can be permitted to have the same lot requirements. So we flagged that by staff just today leading up to that because it might be an area that we need to reevaluate, maybe put it back in there so both can have that opportunity. So that's just one area that we wanted to bring up for council. Secondly, the owner-occupied units with existing ADUs. This isn't really a point of discussion. This was in the ordinance, but we do allow for ADUs to count towards the calculation of a household's total income when it is an owner-occupied unit.
Accessory dwelling units.
Right.
Sorry, yes,
That's
I meant
good.
to say that. Accessory dwelling unit is an ADU. I'll try to say that out. We did add a waiver of review fees. This waiver is for in-house review fees only because we can kind of know what engineers, planners charge for our time. But outside review fees would include something like transportation impact study reports by our outside consultants, which can get kind of costly. So we felt that this might be something that council could consider in adding, but thinking about any unintended consequences or opening up Pandora's box if we waive 1 fee, what other fees will be requested to be waived? So those are just something for council to consider.
As far as the actual language in the proposed ordinance, did we get that clarified? Did we get, there may need, where this is actually mentioned within the context of the proposed ordinance. I think that there was a little bit of confusion the way that the review fees were written, or am I not remembering that correctly, Lindsay?
There was another place where we needed to chop the last sentence off of something. I'm not quite sure if this
Okay,
is.
so there may be some fine tuning relative to the exact language that you may be reading within the proposed ordinance. But one of those areas did refer to some of the fees and the potential waiver of the fees.
Yeah.
So if you come across something that doesn't seem to comport with what the clear intent is.
I know what you're saying. In the section, it's on page 7 under G, waiver of fees. We're saying that the sentence should end behind housing units, period, because we did kind of take some language that was in the back later in the ordinance that says the request must contain information detailing how actual costs will be reduced and how the savings will be passed on to workforce units. The township shall review the request and provide an answer to the developer within 30 days. We feel that that should probably go away and just, review fees can be waived by College Township Council, period. That's one for you to review. Are you ready for me to move to the next slide? Does anyone have any?
How much is the cost savings if we waive those fees?
Aren't we supposed to discuss these as we go through them?
Yeah,
I think that'd be best, yeah.
that's what I was hoping.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we got a point of discussion. let's
So
discuss.
waiver of fees, and we're fortunate we have some developers that are here. But typically, township reviews plans, and time for those reviews are charged back to the developer. And depending upon how clean a plan is when we receive it, how much review time is involved, we review stormwater, we review land development, zoning, all of those things. There are fees that are generated, and ultimately those become the responsibility of the developer, and so they are invoiced for those fees. And I would surmise that those fees in College Township can range anywhere from a few $1,000s to somewhere $10,000, depending upon the number of reviews that end up happening. That said, there are outside reviews that we have to contract out for the expertise. And the prime example is our transportation impact study and all of our transportation needs. We contract, Trans Associates is our consultant that we work with. Those fees are generated typically at a much higher rate, at a higher hourly rate than our fees are generated. And thus, the proposal that's here is to waive the internal fees, but not the additional contract fees that we would end up obligating.
Exactly.
Okay, questions, comments on that?
Sure. Well, have we identified one of the things I was talking about then? That here's a place we could conceivably offset a place where we're asking developer to pay more. And I would say that to include outside review fees. I mean, we're not going to figure it out tonight, but we're going to start putting things on each side, and aren't we?
Yeah.
Like
Rich?
No, I think when I've looked at this, the biggest thing I see, if attainable housing is a public policy, to be a public policy of College Township, there needs to be an investment of public resources to balance that. Otherwise, we're just penalizing the last guy to the game, kind of thing. So we need to have that in balance in everything. And I do see the fee, that's a sunken cost for the township. We're paying our staff to be available, and they can do that. The outside, that isn't, I get it, we need it, that line needs to be there. There's various other opportunities, I think, to make the investment from the township side in saying, hey, this is important, and everything. And some of it's in the zoning requirements, some of it's in the financial stuff. And to Susan's point, there's certain things that we're not gonna give on. So,
This is an opportunity to put our money where our policy is,
yes, yes,
or our
Okay.
priority.
yes.
Any other discussion on this point? Okay, you want to keep going?
Yeah, let's keep going. Next slide, please, Jen. All right, back to incentives. This is for townhouse and multifamily units. Again, the parkland and open space requirement was here. It's recommended to be removed. We did increase height regulations here, so we are giving a height incentive. And it's based upon the same numbers that sets forth the density requirement in the ordinance. So, for example, up there, if a townhouse and multi-unit can go up to a maximum of 45 feet if 5 to 7% of the units are required to be workforce. The table is on page 5, but if it goes from 8 to 10%, the units are required units, then your workforce units can go up to 55% maximum.
55 feet.
55 feet, yeah. Then non-residential commercial buildings, they don't get a height bonus. They just stick with the 35 feet because there's no inclusion of units in those, so they wouldn't receive any height bonus. So that was the recommendation from council there, or from planning commission there.
But there could be, if the site had attainable housing, I mean, it could be extended to commercial.
If it's a mixed use.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, how does this fit into mixed use and even more so form-based code that we're talking about? You know, how does it fit nicely? Does it fit nicely in there?
I think if we, a little bit later, we get into phasing, talking about phasing, and, you know, when non-residential buildings are built, we're really, if that's the first part of the phase and it's just a commercial building, then, you know, what do we do with workforce housing, so forth? So I think this is a little bit related to.
I don't know that it is, because you have to design the building first, and so you need to know the height and everything. You know, so the phasing comes in after you design the
I mean,
building.
keep in mind, with respect to form-based code, at least how, and I'll just speak for myself, how I'm envisioning this playing out, should we ultimately end up adopting. You're not going to have, they will still exist, don't get me wrong, but the majority of the structures that will be constructed will be mixed-use structures, which makes them something more than a non-residential building, right? So what you're dealing with are primarily the percentage of the units that are required to be worked for. So you're going to be dealing with the 45 and the 55 versus the 35 in terms of contemplated construction within a form-based code scenario, right?
Right, you're basically giving them an extra story
Right.
on it.
So I think it's a fair question, and I don't know that we have the precise knowledge at this time, because we just talked about remanding form-based code to the planning commission.
I'm talking more the mixed use, but like you said, mixed use, form-based code is mixed use.
Right,
We have mixed use today.
yeah, and I guess.
Gateway commercials,
Yeah.
probably our poster child for that right now.
Absolutely, yeah. All that I was,
So that when new code for underlying zoning districts, it doesn't conflict, right, it's written. Like, is that what your suggestion is? Like, it's a percentage of the underlying,
Potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one means of addressing it, potentially addressing it.
as opposed to a strict number.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. Plus, plus it's in line with the flexibility that we're talking about with the form-based code.
Right.
To try to look, it will be proportionate. One of the things that we've talked about a lot is terrain, the effect of terrain on height, what might be appropriate in one place absolutely would not be appropriate in another.
Yeah.
Because of terrain and everything. So maybe some flexibility in that.
Okay,
realm.
yeah, I think a percentage is a good way, we'll definitely consider that. Okay. And when we think about form-based code, Mark and I had this discussion a little bit earlier, this ordinance applies township-wide.
Yes.
So that's something to keep in mind too when we think about height. Typically, our zoning map is mostly yellow with single-family residential, but we do have some open spaces, like the office, RO that's out here, and other things where this can be applicable.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll consider some different percentages based upon what exists in the underlying zoning district for this. And will probably be the same on the next slide, Jen. When we get into planned residential developments or PRDs, again, we remove the option to waive parkland and open fees. And we are allowing a height increase, and this goes a little bit higher here for PRDs. Based upon the same percentages you found in that table earlier, but you can go up to 75% or 95%.
Feet.
Or
Feet.
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 Gosh, I don't know why I keep saying percent. 95 or 75 feet. So what does council think about these numbers? Do you want to see them decrease? And then recall what Marina was saying not long ago at our joint meeting about the character of different neighborhoods, and, do you really want to see 9 stories? So this is definitely for your discussion.
And again, PRDs can be anywhere within the boundaries of the township.
Yeah.
I mean, certain areas, but the point is, they're not just in the Dale Summit area.
Correct. Is this something that you would want us to look at a percentage again?
But, I mean, I'll just say, first, it's, how much, if I look at the developers, is this really an incentive, right? Is this something that really matters? Are we saying, hey, this is a great incentive, but maybe they don't think so, and then, maybe we're not so much into it then because it's changing character, right?
Right.
I agree. Without knowing the impact, realistically, it's really hard.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say that we ought to be having discussion on the bullet above that. It seems to me that that's one that.
Especially for PRD, right?
Yeah.
Remember, the PRDs are in essence a negotiated
Negotiation.
land development plan to begin with.
Yeah.
And so while I think that You know, it may make sense to set a maximum in any PRD. Those details are likely going to be negotiated between the developer and planning commission and council,
Yeah.
because that's the way PRDs work. So that's another twist to the concept here, sorry.
Anyone else?
Yeah, PRDs can be an incredibly valuable tool.
I wish we saw more of them.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to make an observation of that. You know, it's something to be negotiated, the parkland. So we're just wondering, I mean, want to go back to DPZ's initiative and the form-based code was involved with it when it happened, and we really support that as a developer. We really find it exciting and what opportunities that can bring. Not that everything's going to be 95 feet. That's not the initiative, but that does allow all of us township as well as the developers, to take a piece of property, because you know that's becoming very costly, and finding the location, so you'll be able to provide the density needed to accommodate the economics, to afford building the market rate units, the attainable units, attainable housing, whether it's affordable or not. I mean, just to be able to have density is a very important aspect to make the form-based code to work as well. But I mean, I'll ask Adam this question. Are you saying the parkland should stay in there even if it's PRD to negotiate it out? Or, I mean, if you're gonna have that kind of density, I mean, a parkland maybe at that project doesn't make sense. So why are we leaving it on the table as a negotiating point?
Yeah, I
We're
don't
all
know.
for providing bike paths and everything, all that stuff, as I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is particularly difficult to conceptualize right now because we're a little twixt in between. There are certain aspects here relative to Dale Summit and the form-based code where it makes perhaps sense to go one way or another. And yet, this is an ordinance that applies township-wide. And so I think that is a little bit of the struggle here as we're evaluating some of these questions. So, for example, in a PRD, it's a negotiation, as I said before, between the developer, PC, and council. And we've experienced this with respect to Aspen. In terms of overall parkland, you know, we knew and were able to identify a target number that they should be providing based on our existing ordinances.
Right.
And yet, what we were able to do was to work with that developer and through a series of exchanges and offsets, we were able to complete what ultimately was an approved parkland agreement with that particular developer, and that was negotiated. So it didn't end up being exactly as the ordinance might otherwise dictate, but it came close, but it wasn't precise. And that was the latitude that was offered through the PRD.
Can I ask you to tell me what that parkland agreement was with Aspen?
Well, it was, some of it was made up on site and some of it was made up off site. And that was the essence of the agreement.
But it didn't require a waiver because it was a PRD.
It didn't require a waiver because it was a
So
PRD.
it makes you wonder whether we even need that language.
Well, and that's what we're, I think,
Right.
why we're having the conversation, right?
And what we're talking about is removing the option to waive, so that would not become an option anymore.
Yeah, as recommended from Planning Commission in this sense, right?
Okay.
Right, exactly.
I'm interpreting that
Yes, you
correct?
are.
Okay. Yeah, they're saying take that option away. But it's an option that's kind of built into the PRD
Right,
at the
through the
beginning.
negotiation. It actually gives more flexibility to do a mix and match or a
Correct.
scaled.
But I think, fundamentally, they're saying, look, just, it shouldn't be an option. We shouldn't be even conceding on open space and parkland for equity reasons, right? For this ordinance, right?
But we,
Yeah,
but we have, what Adam's saying is we have that ability
anyhow.
in the PRD to not, to ask for what would be ordinarily.
To not waive, we can waive or not waive
Yeah.
in the PRD.
Yeah, and we're not getting into the traditional sense. We were using that as a guideline.
Right,
We're gonna get more.
Yeah, it's just very confusing in this
Understood.
context now, really.
and the only thing I would ask there too is form-based code, which it's a hybrid form-based code, so it'll be a College Township form-based code. So this is going to need to be aligned with what we decide with that form-based code. So this might be duplicative or it might be contradictory depending on how that gets sorted out, so.
I think,
Rich?
I was going to say, I think the form-based code gives the same flexibility as the PRD, so I'm not really as concerned with that. I think where the not having the option to waive is more applicable to non-PRD, non-form-based code and all that kind of stuff. I think that's really the genesis of our discussion, is whether we believe or don't believe that's okay.
Okay. I would
And,
agree with that.
and from an equity standpoint, we've had these conversations. The only thing I will say, I think there is potential opportunities. I mean, you can have two separate parcels and they're right beside each other, and everything. So I think reasonable proximity is a potential way of looking at the, I think it was referred to as dedication or swap or whatever like that, and just who determines what reasonable proximity is. I think there needs to be a face on that. You can't just throw that out, kind of thing, but.
I guess the question becomes, is this the philosophical point, or, because then we have to discuss the philosophy in each decision there, the policy, but we are talking about other options.
Tracy, did you have anything? Yeah, right. So, I mean, what's the first order consideration on this? Why are we saying, this is equitable, has to be equitable? And, yeah, right. And what is equitable? Equitable means that you could walk to it? Is that what's equitable? Right? It's in relatively close proximity? Yeah.
Because I think we had a discussion at one point with, is Oak Hall reasonable proximity to?
Oh, yes,
some
we did.
development?
In a whole nother context,
Yes.
yes, we
Yeah.
did. Many years ago.
Yeah.
Are we going to get anywhere in this one? Should we move on?
you want to, I mean, we can make some proposed changes to what we feel like we just got out of this discussion and bring it back for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, let us chew on the conversation here, and we'll do exactly what Lindsay said, but let's kind of continue through.
Yep.
I'd like to get through at least this first review of the entirety of the ordinance and come back. And again, as Lindsay even suggested, this may take a few iterations in working with council. And you can decide whether or not, once you've got it where you like it, whether or not it needs to go back to PC. So, but let's get through this and see what else we can come up with.
Okay.
By the way,
next-
good luck in getting something out of this discussion. We can-
Thank you.
It's going to take a
I'll
lot
need
of
it.
watches on CNET.
Yeah. That's okay, I like your voices. I can listen to them, I don't mind them. Okay, so
you.
Planning Commission's recommendations, provisions for workforce housing. These are things such as fee in lieu, land donations, credit for existing, land donations, off-site development of new dwellings and existing dwellings. In this case, the Planning Commission has recommended that the fee in lieu, the land donation, and the credits do become removed, but they also said that this should be something that council really should also consider, because if you feel like it should be back in, it could be. Their rationale really was, we're looking for units. We are talking about workforce housing units, so they thought that, providing a fee in lieu rather than those units really isn't meeting our goals of what we're trying to accomplish. Same with land donation, but they were okay with both of those coming back if council was all right with that. They didn't feel that the credits for existing workforce housing units is getting us toward our mission of trying to get more units. So that's where the planning commission was on this, and that's why I have that big arrow for the point of discussion to see what council likes to think.
Who wants to lead this one out? Adam, you have
Adam had something to say.
Well, I wanted to put Missy on notice because I think that, I will tell you that from a personal standpoint, I believe that both fee in lieu and land dedication are important tools to leave into the ordinance. And that said, I don't know, Missy, if you would like to expound upon any of that from your experience?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. The developers should be given.
Go on up to the
I
mic,
forgot
please.
CNET. Sorry, CNET.
Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Oh, yes. Good evening. Missy Schoonover, Executive Director of Center County Housing Land Trust, resident of Ferguson Township. I agree with Adam. Especially the fee in lieu and the land donation. Those are tools in the tool belt that developers really need to have. Because when we start taking things like that away, it just doesn't work. They could have land that would be a beautiful location for smaller units, for a quad type thing, that would make them in compliance with the ordinance, but if they don't have that opportunity, then we have no development. With a fee in lieu, I know there's always the argument, well, you're allowing a developer to pay their way out. Fee in lieus are not a one-off. They're not going to pay 100% of the cost of building that unit. It's always a formula based upon land and construction cost. But what it does for the township, it provides you some flexibility to maybe do some of those other financial offsets that you're talking about that could be structured in ways that could go back to the development community to help make the next development more feasible economically for them. Or the township can create its own housing program to provide things like down payment assistance for first-time buyers or new to the community, or financial literacy, things like that. I never advocate for a township to get in the business of building and managing units. That's not a good idea. But there are things that you can do with those fees. The State College Borough, they do a beautiful job using their fee in lieu dollars from their inclusionary ordinance to help fund a huge portion of their first-time homebuyer program. So it's helping to keep people in the municipality, build that tax base, while it also provides the developer more options. The credits for the existing workforce housing, that's a really gray area that people can fall on either side. But the Planning Commission, through their discussions, and they were really deliberate about this one, they really kept coming back to, if we give credits for every existing workforce unit that's already there, it gets us no closer to helping the people live near where they work or where they want their children to go to school. So that's the point of discussion of the three that I see being the more deliberative one that needs time. But the fee in lieu and the land donation, Lindsay, I'm going to put her on the spot. I disagreed with Planning Commission on that right away, because those are two things that are really helpful to developers, but it also can help us as a municipality.
Thank you.
Thanks, Missy.
I'll lead this one out.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with all that, except these are tools for council and the township, not the developer. It's opportunities for us to work with the developer to get the best development for the benefit of the township. So from that standpoint, I don't like taking them out of our tool bag to work with developer to come up with something that suits best. Ultimately, council retains final say, and it's on the developer to make a compelling argument of why this is a good idea and everything, and then for council to agree or not agree. But when you reduce flexibility, you know, some of the best designs on property are because people were forced to be creative and everything. And so I look at it this the same way, and this is a tool to do that.
I think that's a really good point. And I wouldn't have understood it that way if it hadn't been explained. So thank you, Missy and Rich. So I think that it's very important then to have a very clear intent statement so that those tools used by future councils will be used in line with the intent of the ordinance. So, yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, agree, except the understanding is we still have that right to waive it where it's appropriate.
We have the final authority.
Yeah, and I think that really needs to be there.
Yep.
So in essence, it's going to, if we land in that direction, it's going to stay the same as it is right now. Right? Right? So we're making progress.
Well said, but are we in agreement with the credits, though?
Well, we're talking about existing, not a situation where you build them somewhere else, right? Because I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you're talking about existing units,
Right.
okay?
But if somebody wanted to build them at another site, that's not what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yes. See, do we come,
Is that on another slide?
I don't know, I'm trying to recall. The whole reciprocity thing that I got into with staff, is that this?
Yes.
Or it is on this, okay. Yeah. One of the issues that we have right now is that
Yeah.
in,
It wasn't, it was off-site development with reciprocity and getting, yeah.
all right, so it wasn't this.
It wasn't.
So let's speak specifically to this. You are correct. What the existing ordinance refers to is credit for units that have been previously built that are workforce units. Okay, and there's a series of qualifiers that go along with that. They can't be more than 5 years old in terms of timing based on when they got their CO. So if it's 5 years or longer, those units drop out, they don't count. So they can't be counted as toward a credit. That's one thing. There's another provision in there that talks about if the units were built and utilized any relief that was provided through the workforce housing unit ordinance, that those units would not be able to be credited, that they would not count. Okay, so there's a series, at least 2, maybe 3 qualifiers in the existing ordinance that deal with existing units and allowing credit for a developer for having already built those units. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about a situation where a developer, and certainly, you know, Mr. Kavajian is experiencing this at the moment. He has developed units that are workforce housing units that should he develop a new land development, residential land development, in theory, based on the existing ordinance that's in place right now, he would likely be at least eligible for consideration to receive credits. And that's kind of what we're talking about. So we're talking about, in the new iteration of the ordinance, excluding the ability to have credit for previous activity.
I have a question specifically. How do the credits, those are tax credits? What are the credits? I mean, we're
Well,
saying.
the credits are that I've already built them within the last 5 years.
So I don't have to
need
build
For the
this number of
requirement.
units. Okay, so if you have 20 units, you wouldn't have to build 20 units here based on the density. Okay. Thank you.
Rich?
So I kind of looking at this like a retention bonus kind of thing. You know, you're trying to retain the employee, you know, and stuff. You don't want to penalize them for having been here and already contributed to helping the thing. Now, of course, if you're still under a requirement to do that, you can't double count it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. They
You can't double
get
count
both
it.
ways.
But if you're at a point where you had the option of converting to market rate and you chose to retain under attainable, then that should have value. That should have value to them. Or extend the window, like maybe you only have 5 years left. Maybe you extend the window that you're required to.
It's going to require some administrative effort.
Yeah.
But that's part of us
Yeah.
putting our money where our policy is.
Exactly.
That was
Yes.
one of the planning commission's concerns, is the administrative difficulties.
But to Rich's point, you know, if we lose those units to market, we have a net loss.
Yeah.
So,
Those existing.
yeah, regardless, the language of the existing ordinance, whether it stays or whether it goes, but should it stay, it's gonna have to be reworked in some fashion
Yeah,
because
it's wordy and
it-
difficult.
It is somewhat cumbersome.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but I think conceptually, we need to have further discussion on that before we agree that the last point.
Okay.
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
maybe it's not a whole value, it's a
Right.
portion of
The
value.
ratio, yeah.
Yeah, some type of ratio, yeah.
Okay.
All right, supplemental workforce housing regulations. One item removed was considering amenities. So typically with workforce housing units, this is definitely something to discuss. When you're looking at a workforce housing unit against a market rate unit, they should appear the same on the outside. But, you know, since this ordinance has been in place, the interior amenities were able to be different. This is considering that the interior amenities and the gross floor area may not differ from the market rate units. So it's my suggestion to add in, you know, to allow the interior amenities to be different, because that's the difference between the Formica or the granite and things like that. So that's one suggestion for council to consider. Then we move on to cost offsets. We did remove that. We tried to incorporate some of those into the part where we were waiving fees, but that didn't seem to really work out. Those were removed. Also, accessory dwelling units when being certified for gross rental income for buyers. Calculation of rental prices, the area median income remained the same. So anyone making or who earns 65% or less of area median income are eligible for rental units. HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, is now referenced rather than the State College Metropolitan Statistical Area, or MSA, just for consistency purposes. And then finally, the rent to own, the initial lease time changed from 18 months to 12 months to be consistent with the typical lease that's just around today. Any further discussion on any of those?
Questions? Comments? Anything?
What the arrow points to is probably the most significant
Yeah.
item that's on this particular slide here, is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't make that distinction in the original ordinance?
And the distinction,
That the interiors can be different?
Yes.
We did or did not make that in the original ordinance?
in the original ordinance, the interior amenities can be different.
Right.
Yes, this is suggesting that they be the same as the market rate,
Yeah.
even indoors.
Yeah, that isn't gonna work.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't see how that encourages.
Exactly, yeah, it
I
was,
think going to the balancing, you know, yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's an unrealistic expectation.
It's an
yeah.
unfair.
Or even, okay, unfair even, yes. So,
I'd rather stand my ground on a couple of those other ones. This, to me, is not,
Yeah. I mean, I'm like you, like my most important one I think is the parkland and the open space for me. Like, I don't have a lot of wiggle room to negotiate on that, but.
Yeah, and if that collectively is the difference between one or two more units, I'd rather have the one or two more units with the Formica countertops.
Yeah.
Right. I think when we included the word "not," we were thinking just in regards to gross floor area and not interior amenities. So I think it was mistakenly crossed out and should be put back in.
So the size of the units are the same,
Right.
Right.
but how they're finished out is potentially different.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
That's reasonable.
Well,
I think that's reasonable.
Quick question on that, but what is like for replacement and everything, are these lesser amenities that are put in, are they gonna cost long-term to repair? Like if you're not putting the upgraded materials in there, are we gonna spend more money with repairs in the future because they have the lesser amenities? Just a quick question, something to think about.
That's a good question.
That's a
Missy,
good point.
can you maybe speak to help us out with the interiors, or maybe even Ara? I don't know.
On a rental, that's on the
Right.
the
on a
owner.
re- in
In a rental, it's
you're
an
right,
easy
in a rental
decision. It's on the
situation,
owner.
It's on the owner. That's,
The rentals are going to be changed.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I couldn't hear everything that you said, but when you're talking about interior amenities with rentals, they're usually on a schedule for when those things are going to be changed out, just because of wear and tear. And if it is a market rate versus a workforce housing owner occupied, that's a cost of home ownership that an ordinance is not going to be mandating. They have to replace their roof every so often, or they have to do these things. That's another component where we at the Land Trust, we really advocate for home buyer education and things like that so that people understand what is the real cost of home ownership before they get into that. But it's a different animal if it's a rental or if it's something that is for sale. Do you agree with her? Yes. Does that answer your question?
It does, but.
But you're right, if somebody was owning it.
Right, if you're owning it, I want to not to have to replace something sooner than later because, yeah, like, got it.
But I guess it's the same as, you go to one house and they have Formica and all that kind of stuff, and you go to another house and they have granite. There's a difference. I mean, there's a difference in the pricing.
Dishwashers
And I think,
But go ahead.
I think I understand where you're going with that, and that's an equity issue.
Right.
The thing that sort of twists in my mind, that it makes home ownership available to somebody who might not otherwise have home ownership available, and that's an important equity issue. So the home amenities may not be as nice, and they may not be as sustainable. But the cost of the repair of those amenities would be less than losing the opportunity to own a home. And that's really important to me, is that people have, and I'm recognizing there are going to be some things we're going to negotiate here, but I just want home ownership to be available to as many people. It's a tough one.
And what are some examples of amenities? Do we know?
flooring.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Crown molding, is that an amenity? Cabinets, right?
Formica.
Bath fixtures. Yeah, plumbing fixtures. Yeah.
I learned the hard way that you can't put a
Hardware
hot
on
pot.
Appliances,
Right.
potentially appliances.
Yeah, appliances.
I learned the hard way that you can't put a hot pot on a Formica surface without
Okay.
something under it.
Okay,
So,
thanks, I just wanted that for the
I
record.
thought I was the only one that did that. Thank you.
you only do it once. Yeah, I think, I really hear where you're coming from on that one, and I don't know how you feel about the opportunity to have that home ownership. I took the opportunity to have home ownership on a condominium that didn't have amenities that were in the previous home I had, but it was my start at independent home ownership, and that was super important to me.
Yeah, starter home is what comes to mind all the time. And
Yeah.
you aspire to
to go from there.
Yeah.
I'm still in my starter home, so.
And in this township, home ownership is out of reach for too many people right now.
Okay. So I think we have, anything else to add?
No,
Chris?
I just disagree, but just me disagreeing. All
Move
right.
on?
Yeah, I have about 7 more slides.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. There's only 1 or 2 left. All right,
We've
so.
been there before.
Yeah.
We have been.
At 9:15.
All
So,
right,
yeah, phase.
so moving on, the provisions for workforce housing continued. This is where we added a phasing clause because planned residential developments a lot of the times are phased. Even some, just regular land development plans are phased with preliminary and final plans. In some cases, in phasing around the areas, you always say, I have all 4 phases, but you usually build the low-hanging fruit first, the easy things, maybe the single-family houses, maybe some commercial, and maybe the opportunity to push workforce units that are required off into other phases exist. So our suggestion to kind of stop this is to do the following. So in the first phase, if the first phase contains 50% or more non-residential uses, no workforce units are required in that phase. And it goes on to say, any construction of additional phases shall contain a number of units equal to the percentage of total units required in the entire development period. We feel like it should stop there. Because when we go into dividing the amount of land and everything, all of that should be considered at the first phase. So you're, figuring out how much land you have and what the density is, so that should be taken out. And then when a plan is phased, occupancy shall not be granted to the final 15% market rate units until all workforce units for active phases are developed. And then we just talked about this recently. The Planning Commission hasn't seen this yet, but consider adding no occupancy shall be granted in a subsequent phase until all workforce units are completed in the prior phase. This is kind of our opportunity to ensure that with phasing, we do see the units. So this is the last thing I have for you as a point of discussion.
Okay.
So, point of clarification, Lindsay. So if I have 45% of my first phase is going to be commercial, I'm obligated to build what of workforce units?
Mark, answer for that? I know Mark and I
Well,
worked on
this
this
would-
language together.
This would have been, if it's, the way I looked at it when we threw this together, because phases can be all different sizes. But I envisioned this, that if there's a development with 5 phases, and the development as a whole requires 100 attainable housing units. Phase 1 requires 20. Phase 2 requires 20. Phase 3 requires 20. And what was brought up that we sort of came up with this, that was brought up at Planning Commission, well, what if the first phase are the commercial buildings? So we figured this would allow that if you want phase 1 to be your commercial buildings, you provide nothing. But when you do that phase 2, you're providing 40 units instead of just the 20 for that unit. You're providing a percentage that should have attached to the first phase.
So it's percentage plus?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And that in turn would prevent a developer from doing a 5-phase project, having phase 5 being all the attainable housing, and 20 years later, we're still waiting for them to submit and start phase 5.
Yeah, and there have been circumstances in the center region where we've run into this.
Yes.
Not in College Township.
There have been where, a lot of the times they're on the phasing plan, there's a commercial component, but it's phase 7A or 7D, and then it's hard to see that ever get built.
Well, and then that last point ensures that you can't move to the next phase without
Yes.
completing your obligation in the previous phase.
Yes,
That's-
somebody couldn't get a
Right.
certain number online
You
and
couldn't
say,
get to that point.
I'm done, I'm
With
skipping
this.
to the next phase. and leave.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Can I ask a question, Mark, so I want to understand? So let's use your example. The first phase, it's 5 phases, 100 units, and 20 if you were building residential units in each phase. But there's a initial phase before that that's commercial, or a commercial component in there, and all you're building is commercial. In your next phase, which would be phase 2, if you owed 20 units from the first phase, are you now required to build 40 in the next phase? Or you still haven't built any units? You still haven't built any of the 100 units? You would still take that 100, spread it off of the remaining phases equally?
I guess you could do that. I kind of envisioned it if you had 5 phases, 100 units required, because that first phase has.
Only commercial.
Only commercial, that's something I didn't really consider if it was 100% commercial.
It could be, because especially if it's in the PRD, it could be. Because
very true.
I'll share with the economics of it. For a developer, you want to start generating some income to be able to afford the infrastructure and all those things in order to start planning for the residential component if it's a mixed-use building. It's just simple arithmetic and economics. So you would build your commercial pieces to start, the project going. And
Yes.
then,
So I guess we
you
could-
shouldn't be, it would be punitive if suddenly you added 40 units to your 20-unit development in the next phase. I mean, I understand what you're trying to do. I just want to point out where this is where if we sit down, and I'm sure if you give us an opportunity, we can work out something to account for. We'll tell you the facts of how we're dealing with it, and I'm sure we'll find a mean. I get what you want. It should be spread out.
Yeah.
So,
It also doesn't distribute it across the phases.
Yes.
Also, you got a lump here and then.
Right.
So-
It's like, it feels like you were punished because you didn't build in the first, you did double up, so it has to just be spread. I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah,
Not that you meant that.
We were looking to find a way to enable a developer to do a phase of commercial and not have to worry about that workforce housing for the entire development.
Okay.
so I have a.
Good points. Yes,
I
Susan.
have a question, if you would.
Sure.
So this is not to imply you would be this developer, but in the future, we might be dealing with developers we've never dealt with before, who might not necessarily feel as committed to the community as you clearly do. So is there some way to ensure that they've built their commercial, their first phase is commercial, and they haven't built any housing units, and that's it? I guess you can answer that, the technical piece of it. So again, I'm not implying you're that developer.
I'll try to give you the best answer to
Yes.
that. Maybe, go ahead, if you want to say something.
No, I was just going to say, just a reminder that it says contains 50% or more, so.
Right.
The other
Could be
side-
up to 100%, sure,
Yeah,
sure.
50%
But I'm
might
asking
not be
more,
commercial.
From a place that, I'm not as familiar with this, so, the potential you have somebody that comes from out of town that doesn't have any commitment and does this, so then what? Now we have commercial space that was developed, and now they're not coming back to finish phases 2 through 5. They don't own the building, I guess.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of answers to that. One of them comes to mind, is they could pay the fee in lieu. They'll be forced to pay a fee in lieu if they're not building
Okay.
it, as some sort of hammer, way of putting it. But there's a chance that they'll build the development, the commercial only, and it might be 2 years sitting there. But if they've submitted a plan that has market rate units with attainable units, that's part of their economics. At some point, they're going to have to realize it, or it could happen that they'd walk away. But if there's a fee in lieu piece of it, maybe they'll feel it'd be great to come and pay the fee in lieu, because of right now, for example, the environment with interest rates where they're at and the cost of construction may pause from developing it altogether. But at some point, if some other developer may acquire that property and find a way that they can go ahead and build that, it might be tied to a fee in lieu, or you still force them to build, not force them, keep them committed to building the attainable units.
And I'm thinking of the Ghost Hotel out by Independence Place in the Dale Summit area, the hotel that was begun to be developed but then wasn't finished. So the residents in Independence Place, what?
The former Ghost.
Yeah. But that was a blight to the residents there for a couple of years, but that was before my time, so I don't have any.
Well, that was a COVID effect too.
Yeah, understood. But
Wouldn't one of the other, I mean, what about bonding?
I think we can work this out. I mean, we understand what Planning Commission wants here. I think there's some balance here. We'll strike a balance here. A good example would be Grace Woods, Toff Trees. I mean, these are phased multi-use developments that lasted 50 years, and they evolve over time. We just need to understand that could happen and prepare for that.
But
We can also point to some.
An out-of-towner might not be as committed as yours. That's a good question.
And, I want to think ahead.
They won't be as committed.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else on this one? So, more work on this one.
Yeah, it's coming back. You guys will see some iterations of what we talked about. Oh,
Yep, we got our esteemed PC member.
Sat patiently.
So several notes, we're a recommending body, keep in mind, so we're not saying, this is what we want and absolutely has to be. The remand letter came out November 16th. So I think between then and when we recommended the plan, it was maybe about 7 or 8 public meetings, we would have welcomed any input from developers, bankers, anybody. We would have very much welcomed that. Third thing, probably if there was a couple overlying themes when we went through this, probably would be equity and consistency. And you could sort of say that the whole reason we need a workforce housing ordinance in the first place is for equity. Because right now, the housing market in College Township, State College, Center County isn't very equitable. So that's probably the underlying reason, why we worked on this ordinance, is to make it equitable. And some of the stuff, the fee and lieu, we probably considered that from an equitable standpoint. The sidewalks, definitely we considered it equitable. People are gonna have workforce housing. We wanted nice sidewalks, we wanted nice parkland.
Could I say that that's exactly what we want from Planning Commission, and that you should not take any of this back and forth any other way. Because what some of us who served on Planning Commission always said is we had it easier because we could make recommendations based on sound planning principles or equity or consistency, and it was up to council to factor in those political variables and financial variables. So that's all we're doing. But we want that as the starting point.
And that is how we started the conversation tonight, was to emphasize that this really is important in terms of supporting socioeconomic diversity in our community and making home ownership and attainable housing available. So that's really important.
Keep in mind too, we represent every taxpayer in College Township. That's how we look at things also.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The last slide I have is just finishing up the ordinance. Section 3, we will be, if we move forward with this removal of reference of sidewalks, that will come out. And then we just have the other sections that typically go with an ordinance. So I don't anticipate any public hearing being set tonight, so we will definitely take all of your comments back and come back with something.
We had a little bit of a public hearing here tonight.
Yeah, I did want to touch on something that Ara had brought up in kind of his opening statement, and that had to do with the administration of the ordinance. I don't think that anyone should have a misconception about how this ordinance is being administered. I mean, we presently have 28 workforce housing units that were provided as per requirement by Aspen Heights. Those are filled or substantially filled as we speak, and I understand that going into the 2025 rental season, all 28 of those units will in fact be occupied. And each and every one of those units, the income qualification does not fall to the developer. It falls to the township. The township, through an agreement that it is executed with the Center County Housing and Land Trust to provides the income verification of those units. Our process, our administration is pretty straightforward and simplistic as compared to some endeavors relative to administration. Our requirements with respect to what those units need to be and how they're managed is left largely, almost entirely, up to the actual developer. We assume the responsibility for the year-over-year, year-to-year income qualification. That is something that is provided by the township. We do, and as we have through our developer agreement with Aspen Heights. Aspen Heights is paying 50% of the annual cost of that income qualification, as is College Township. So we are splitting those costs relative to the administration. And I think for 2024, I believe that cost is a total of $8,400. So there's $4,200 is paid by the township and $4,200 is paid by the developer in assisting with reimbursement back to the Center County Housing Land Trust for providing those income verification services. So I just didn't want that to get lost in the shuffle here. I think the way that we have designed our administration, I think it has worked very well. I think it's very efficient. I think it leads to little to no interference on the part of the township with the developer and the way that they choose to manage those workforce housing units. We basically, under the existing ordinance, have three requirements. The ordinances, because the ordinance is inclusionary, the units will be built. In terms of rental units, because that's what we're dealing with, you can lease to anyone, provided they don't make more than 65% of the current AMI, and the affordability period is 30 years. That's the essence of College Township's program. In terms of the type of unit that is built, whether it's a efficiency, a one-bedroom, a two-bedroom, a three-bedroom, we don't dictate that. We provide, I should say, the Center County Housing Land Trust and others can provide guidance to developers about what may be needed within the community as far as one-bedroom, two-bedroom, three-bedroom units. We don't dictate that. We don't dictate where those units are going to be, if they're all on one floor, if they need to be scattered throughout a development, as some other center region programs do. So in terms of the actual administration, it is largely left to the developer and the owner and the operator of the development to make those decisions. We take very much a light touch approach to the way that we administrate the program. And I certainly want to see that continue. I think it is a hallmark of our program. I think we do it a little bit differently than others. And I think to this point, when we have finally had the opportunity, I think it's worked well.
Okay.
That's it.
All right.
And it's an example of putting our money where, College Township is participating in the cost of the administration.
Okay. All right. You ready to move on to new business? New business one.
It's Lindsay again.
That's me again.
Just want to thank everybody for giving us the opportunity. Appreciate it. We look forward to working together with staff and come back with best recommendations from our staff. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you. Okay, so this is a memo to State College Borough regarding council's comments on the Center Hills Country Club Land Development Plan. Because at the last meeting, the land development plan was presented for the Center Hills Country Club, which College Township had the opportunity to review what was in our jurisdiction, which was the egress and ingress, the lighting from the outside, entrance lighting, and sidewalks and stormwater. So those are the 4 things that we had to stick to. The Planning Commission did that and made their recommendation to council, and can't go without saying that at that Planning Commission meeting, there was a large group of folks who were there who had a lot of concerns about the noise and impacts of the development at the country club. So what's in front of you now is the proposed language that we can send to the borough outlining different ways to mitigate the sounds of pickleball. So we're just looking for your input tonight. If you want to send this, if you have further questions, I'm here to answer those.
Okay. Who wants to lead us out? Tracy, you want to go?
Yeah, well, I have a little concern on discussing this, just because I know that some members of the College Township were here to talk about it, but they have left, so.
I noticed that. That's too bad.
I'm just a little concerned that their concerns are not going to be heard tonight, so. Go ahead.
I think we have some online right now.
Okay.
I think Mrs. Savino.
As well as on our consent agenda.
Yeah, so I mean,
Say
we
that
have the
again.
letters in the
I'm
consent
sorry.
agenda. If there is anyone online, we could ask them to speak up to this issue before we go any further, if they want to. And also if there's anyone else in the room.
They just raise their hand, use the raise the hand feature.
Yeah, you can, if you want to speak, you could just go ahead and raise your hand, or
How do I do this?
That's good.
you're good.
We
We
can
can hear
hear
you. We got you.
Yep, you can?
Yep.
Yes, sir?
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Tom Katanchik. I'm at 422 Scenery Drive. One of the single residences, and the proposed pickleball courts would be directly behind my backyard. The HOA borders the backside and the side of my home. I know this moratorium was presented by a gentleman that runs the HOA next door, and we are just, obviously very concerned about pickleball, and there's been issues in a Park Forest area where there actually were moved because of it, and I think, myself speaking, in general for the group, that we all have big concerns. I know we presented against the light variance at the borough zoning and planning commissions, and I believe that's going to be shut down, and they're not going to be granted that variance from what we heard from zoning. But as far as pickleball, we were also addressing our concerns about noise and what happens when pickleball starts. And there's basically going to be calls every day to the borough, and they said that's basically the risks that the country club is taking, because if it does happen, they could get shut down and have a cease and desist on use of it. But to avoid that happening in the future, I guess our concern is what can be done to prevent that from happening before the courts are built, used, and then have to be shut down. So that's kind of the goal of what we did as a group here, presenting it to you. And I know we presented this to the borough as well, but I'm not sure if we got the same response back from them that we did from you yet. Obviously, you're representing the residents that are impacted by it being in College Township. So that's where we are as far as pickleball, because it is a national issue. I mean, there's evidence of it in the news, in neighborhoods and communities all around the United States. So that's the goal of what we are presenting to you as a group that is going to be impacted by it possibly very soon if this construction actually does go through.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So I mean, I would, just in response to his comments, I would ask, what we have outlined in this proposed letter, is that reflecting the concerns from the moratorium and the letters that we received, correct?
Mm-hmm.
or discussing them, right, pointing them out.
Again, as a reminder, this is a unique situation in that all the impacts are going to be in College Township, and yet the land development approval is in essence going to be provided by State College Borough. And the State College Borough doesn't have any residents that are immediately adjacent or adjoining or that will be impacted directly as a result of this development. The MPC is pretty clear in terms of what you as College Township Council have the ability to comment on. And those were the 4 items that Lindsay mentioned: the stormwater, the ingress and egress, sidewalks, and the external lighting at the street.
The street, yeah.
Those are the limitations of the formal comments or issues that you can consider, given the fact that this is a joint land development plan that's submitted to both State College Borough as well as to College Township. We're only dealing with 4 of those elements, which frankly don't address any of the issues that are apparent here in the letters that we've received, or that we know and we recognize that will be a problem going forward. So just as that's kind of a quick refresher for maybe those that weren't present at our last meeting when we had this conversation. Council actually tabled the approval of those 4 items to allow for some opportunity to do some research, to make some comments back to State College Borough, to express, in addition to weighing in on the issues that we have jurisdiction over, to also make known our concerns, council's concerns relative to the establishment of specifically the pickleball courts in what is a residential College Township neighborhood.
Thanks for that background, Adam. All right, so council, right, in that, right, there's a proposed memo to send off to State College Borough to outline those concerns, which I think are reflective of some of our residents' concerns, right? Tracy, did you have anything else to add to your comments?
No.
Or questions? Okay, Susan?
I think that based on what the MPC says, this is what we can do, and I think it's well-written, and to the best of our ability for the residents in College Township, this is what we can do right now.
Okay. Rich?
Right, it's a uncomfortable situation, but it's the one we're in. The one thing I would say is the potential that we need to look at our ordinances in case we're in the borough role. That we decide, maybe there's some things we can do proactively before there's a land development plan before us.
I like that.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, 4 comments. First of all, I grew up across the street from the park in question, Park Forest, and people were playing tennis down there all the time. Really wasn't an issue. I think it became an issue, well, I know it became an issue there, not necessarily because of the noise of the game itself, but you have to understand that you have 2 people playing tennis most of the time, and it's a rather passive game. Pickleball generally has 4 people on that same court space, oftentimes more because they rotate in, and there's a lot of conversation and a lot more cars and a lot of other things. So it's as much that as it is the actual noise of the ball hitting the paddle that I know had people upset. So given that, I think the township did a bang-up job here with this list of things, because it really addresses all of those things that I just talked about when you're talking about asking them to focus on buffer zones, and sound barrier, fencing, and then later on down here in enforcing rules, and soundproofing. The only suggestion I would make in this would be under regular maintenance. I don't know that maintaining the court surfaces and equipment is going to have that much of an effect. I would focus and emphasize the regular maintenance on the noise, on the buffer zones, and the sound barrier fencing. So I think if you're going to ask for those things, you need to emphasize that those things need to be maintained. You can't just plant some stuff and then let it die or whatever, because I really think that has a bigger impact based on what I've seen at Park Forest on the noise. And as far as the enforcing the rules of operation, that really, to the extent that you can put signage up, and maybe that signage exists in College Township at the entrance to the facility. We're only open whatever, to whatever. So maybe add that to the, whatever this enforcement of the rules, that the signage is, I don't know, before you even get there, what those rules are. And of course, we've already mentioned the lighting. It's not part of the land development plan, but we're certainly not precluded from offering comment to their zoning hearing board, correct?
I'm sorry.
On the lighting variance?
I think the zoning, that already happened.
Oh, that already happened.
They denied it, right?
They had no
denied it.
hardship.
Okay, and then the last thing I would say, I was going to say exactly what Rich said, is this, the best thing we can do is take this list and reconcile it against anywhere where we could have those type of uses, and maybe, just maybe, we take that particular type of use and make it a conditional use, so that we have some more flexibility. Just tossing that out there, not to decide tonight, but to emphasize what Rich said. I think that's the thing we can do the most, is to revisit, where that could happen, and apply what we're asking the borough to apply, but build it in.
I have one follow-up to Eric's, on the regular maintenance. I understand what you're saying. Maybe generalize it to all of the various,
Not
sound.
just the surface or the paddles.
Yeah, the buffer zones, the surfaces, the signage.
Vegetation.
Buffer zones.
If the trees die or they're
Fencing
not
and all that kind of
maintained.
stuff.
I was gonna make that same point, Rich.
Cool.
That's all I had, Dustin.
Yeah, I would just add, the encouragement to not just stop, right? Like, if there is improved technology as it goes in time, right, to, research that, install that, continue to engage on those improvements. I don't know how, I don't know if that can be worked in with the maintenance type thing.
I think I've got what you're saying here.
That's all I had. Anybody else? Yeah, Mike.
Oh, we do have.
Oh, we got a hand up. Simba?
Hi, my name is Simba Zaffino. I live at 146 Senior Court in State College. I am the unit that's closest to the proposed pickleball courts, and I have started the email campaign to State College Borough and to College Township. I've also been in touch with Mike Tilka. I had a lengthy conversation with him yesterday from COG. I do want to ask, the memo that you're preparing to send to State College Borough, is that available for public copy? Can I have a copy of that, or how do I obtain a copy of that?
It was
on the website.
Yeah, it's actually available as part of the packet information this evening, and it's all available online.
Everyone.
Yeah, it's actually listed under NB1. NB stands for New Business -1. So the memo the council is reviewing this evening is incorporated under that agenda item. So that's part of the packet, and it's definitely available to the public.
And when am I correct, once it goes out, it will be included in the manager's report as outgoing?
Outgoing correspondence, yes.
Next meeting.
At
At the next meeting.
So the finalized with the additional edits and revisions, yeah. Did you get that, ma'am?
Yeah, I am having a bit of trouble just from the tech perspective hearing all of you, and I've been in the meeting since the beginning. I would say some of your microphones are a little muffled, or maybe if you're turning your head, I don't hear it all that well, but this was the most important part of the council meeting that I was wanting to hear anyway, so I thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we can make sure that you get that, ma'am. I think we have your email address through the registration on Zoom. So we can get that out to you tomorrow morning.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anything else?
Would staff prefer a motion on this, or are we just by consensus?
Motion never hurts. I move to authorize. I think you need to decide who should sign it. It probably should come from the chair. As opposed to from the manager.
Yeah.
But I would authorize the chair to execute, this.
To draft and send
Yes.
a memorandum according to this evening's discussion.
There we go, that. So moved.
Well, hold on.
Can you
So
say it one more time, Rich?
No.
who are we sending it to?
I'll make the memo.
Yeah, I'm gonna need some help here from staff. Should this go to their planning commission? Should this go to borough council?
No, it's, talking with their planning director, it should go to the borough manager. The borough council won't see this because land development plans are approved on a
At the
staff
staff
level
level.
at the borough. So I was notified to send it to Mr. Fontaine, and then he will give it to the planning staff as needed.
We'll copy Ed on that.
Okay, that's a good
as
idea.
well.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just wanted that clarification.
And why not the president of council? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like seriously, let's
They're
just
the ultimate leadership of the borough.
Very good. I think we can accommodate that.
Yeah, maybe, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, go
So-
ahead.
Susan, give me.
I'll make a motion to authorize the chair to execute and send a memo to the manager of the State College Borough regarding council comments on the Center Hills Country Club Land Development Plan.
Very nice. Very seconded.
You second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? No.
You done growed up?
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Can you give another hand?
Okay?
No, that's my,
That's her cursor.
that's
her
the cursor
cursor.
on that computer.
Oh,
It's a hand, but it's not anything. It's a yellow hand if it's a hand.
okay.
I think so.
Okay. Is there anything for staff informatives that we wish to bring and highlight? No? All right, council and staff, other matters. All right. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Did you have another matter?
No, I was just gonna remind everybody, Wednesday, the 24th, 2 to 4. Bob
Cupcakes.
Long's open house.
My partner in dimes.
Yes?
Okay. Have a motion, we're adjourned.
Hey, wait a minute.